Hey guys, here we are at part 6 of the story, where the Toads raise Naruto to replace Minato as their summoner. Trained as a sage, Naruto will strike out to find his fellow Jinchuriki. Just not in the way you would expect. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe button. Now, let's jump right in. Hold on a second, said Kisame, pointing Saimata angrily at Nagato. Can we go back to the part where you kill us all for a second? Because if you said what I heard, you and I are going to have a problem, God or not. Akatsuki has no place in the world of peace I will create. The purpose of creating Akatsuki was to use it until I had no further need of it, and then dispose of it. Replied Nagato simply. Well, I don't take kindly to people killing comrades, said Kisame as he lowered Saimata and sprinted forward. I just got done avenging a fallen comrade, and it felt pretty good. But I'd rather not have to do it again. Jumping up, Kisame brought Saimata down with all his might. At the last second, the black liquid around Nagato moved in between them, stopping Saimata dead in its tracks. Your paltry weapon is nothing before the chakra of the Ten Tails, said Nagato. Kisame just smirked. Bad move trying to block me with chakra. I lead it all. Kisame adjusted his grip and pulled, dragging the length of Saimata across the pitch-black chakra shield. To his shock though, the legendary blade didn't manage to steal any chakra from the barrier. Kisame was forced to twist his sword awkwardly to block the 3 black spikes that shot out from the black shield and attempted to impale him. Saimata got in the way though, and the spikes failed to penetrate the legendary blade, instead launching Kisame backwards. Skidding to a stop, Kisame swung his sword like an oversized club to smack away the black orbs of chakra into the ground as they came flying at him. What was that? Asked the shark man incredulously. Saimata didn't get any of that weird chakra. Fuck if I care, but I know this, shouted Hidan as he ran at Nagato, dragging his scythe along the ground as he went. There's only one god, and that's goddamn Jashin. Hidan jumped up, and swung his scythe downwards at the self-proclaimed god. Fool, said Nagato simply as the black chakra of the Ten Tails flowed around him to catch the scythe. Rather than simply be stopped like Saimata had been, the blood-red scythe disappeared into the black chakra and kept going as if the barrier wasn't even there. When it would have emerged from the black shield, it simply didn't, and Hidan was left holding a short spike. Nagato raised his hand menacingly, and a black rod shot out of his sleeve. A simple twist of his wrist snapped the rod, and the Ten Tails Jinchuriki brought the weapon down. That idiot, said Kakuzu emotionlessly. Despite his berating of Hidan, his right hand shot out and caught the immortal zealot, yanking him out of the way. The trip back to the group of betrayed Akatsuki members wasn't gentle, and anyone other than Hidan would have likely been incredibly injured after being pulled along the ground. If anyone in this world can kill you, it's him, and we'll need everyone alive if we want to stand any chance of winning. Hidan sat up sharply, covered in cuts and bruises. Well, that still hurt you, fucker. And that son of a bitch destroyed my scythe, too. Nagato calmly pulled the black rod out of the ground that it had impaled in place of Hidan. Konan, Zetsu. Take them out, he commanded simply, not giving the other members of Akatsuki any breathing room. Konan took to the skies silently, looking a bit sad, and Zetsu saluted happily, or at least half of them did. Aye aye, sir. Will do, said the bicolored man as he slid into the ground. We need a plan if we don't want to all die here and now. Growled Kisame as he prepared Saimata to block any incoming attacks. One thing's for sure, we'll need as many of us as we can spare to take on pain. 2 of us need to keep Zetsu and Konan at bay in the meantime. I'll take care of the angel, said Datara as her clay creation began to hover above the ground. That stupid paper crap isn't anything even resembling art. Besides, I'm the only one who can fly. No one objected, and Datara took to the skies to confront the only other female in Akatsuki in a battle for aerial supremacy. Naruto reacted suddenly, shattering the ground with a single punch and taking the others off guard. Zetsu in particular was surprised by the attack and barely managed to get out of the way before sinking back into the ground. I can see through Aloe Vera's hiding techniques. He isn't a frontline fighter, so I should be able to help you out once I'm done. Fine by me, but there won't be much left for you. Replied Kisame tersely as he spun Saimata around a bit. I'm not going to go easy on this traitor. Blue spikes emerged from Saimata's hilt as the blade slowly began to merge with its owner. Kakuzu discarded his Akatsuki cloak in a single fluid movement as the threads that lurked under his skin burst out, segmenting his arms and placing the remaining lightning-style mask over his shoulder. Kakuzu's speak was surprisingly understandable as he spoke around the mass of black threads fanning out of his mouth. I wonder, how much a god is worth. Hidan stood up and wheeled his arm to loosen it up. Well, this poser isn't a damn god, so don't get your hopes up too much, Kakuzu. I suppose the leader of Akatsuki should be worth a bit though. To Jashin, shouted Hidan as he raised his ruined scythe to the skies. My art is eternal, said Sasori as he pulled out the scrolls that contained his 2 Kazekage puppets. The sand would make the movements of his favorite puppets jerky, but without the 5th Kazekage controlling the sand, it would likely fall out during the course of battle. Its perseverance in the face of you trying to destroy it will prove the worth of my art. In dual clouds of smoke, the S-ranked puppeteer was flanked by the weaponized corpses of 2 other S-ranked ninja. As long as I can have those eyes for my research, said Orochimaru as he bit his thumb and ran through the hand seals that made him a snake summoner. Besides, I haven't accomplished my goals yet, so I'm afraid you'll have to be the one who has to die. When the smoke cleared, Orochimaru was standing atop a giant purple snake with 4 large horns. I don't see 100 sacrifices here, Orochimaru, complained Manda loudly. Give me one good reason not to eat you right here and now. You're right, of course, conceded the Sani nonchalantly. Now that I think about it, you probably wouldn't have been much help against this opponent anyway. You'll pay for insulting my prowess later, but for now I'll show you the power of the snakes. Orochimaru grinned before spitting up a smaller snake. This snake in turn spat out a double-sided blade that Orochimaru caught out of the air. Nagato looked on at the 5 S-ranked ninja in front of him that were prepared to kill him with supreme confidence. Perhaps you could provide enough of a challenge to at least let me get a decent warm-up. But know this. If you insist on fighting me, your deaths will be even more painful. With his warning out of the way, Nagato manipulated one of the black orbs of the Ten-Tail's volatile chakra into a solid black shakujo that likely held the same disintegrating properties as the corrosive chakra. Now then, your deaths shall usher in an era of peace the likes of which this world has never seen. Konan and Deidara sized each other up, each with several of their creations flying around them. So I get that Nagato is crazy now, but why are you following him? Asked Deidara as several of her clay birds were hit by paper shuriken. The 4-pointed paper did little to affect the clay creatures, but Deidara had no doubt they would be as lethal as any metal weapon. World peace was the dream of Akatsuki's first leader, and the goal that Nagato follows as well. This is the only way, and I will support the bridge to peace. With that, Konan launched another wave of paper shuriken at Deidara. The sheer number of origami weapons was too much for her suicidal birds to catch in their bodies, and Deidara dove sharply to avoid the paper shuriken. Oh, so you're just crazy too. Good to know, yeah. Deadpanned Deidara as she sent her birds flying towards Konan. The blue-haired Akatsuki member swung her arms down and launched 6 more shuriken, 1 at each of the birds, and hit them all dead on. These bits of paper began to sizzle before exploding violently. The clay pieces of art were too volatile to survive an explosion without giving in to their own unstable tendencies, and they all detonated a safe distance away from Konan. Gritting her teeth, Deidara dodged to the right and avoided more paper shuriken that exploded shortly after passing her. I was going to kill you for trying to kill me and my friends, but now it's personal. You'll pay for ripping off my art. Tossing out 2 small 4-winged birds, Deidara sent her next attack at Konan. The paper counterattack was expected, and the faster pieces of art easily dodged the wave of shuriken. The mobile bombs exploded in Konan's face, and she remained as emotionless as ever as she exploded into a flurry of paper and reformed several meters away. Deidara flipped off of her mount to avoid the barrage of paper weaponry that embedded itself into the clay sculpture Deidara had been riding. Deidara stopped her freefall by creating another large bird to fly on, this one a simple hawk, and sent her previous mount hurtling towards the paper angel. More exploding tags took the bird down, but the chakra held inside it was able to cause an explosion that Konan had to turn to paper to dodge. Reforming her torso and wings, Konan looked around frantically for Deidara, though it didn't show on her face. You think that paper crap is art? Konan looked down, and her eyes widened as a large hawk barreled into her neck and carried her high into the air. I'll turn you into real art, yeah. Deidara immediately popped more clay into the mouth on her hand as the hawk exploded high in the air. The explosion scattered the sheets of paper that made up Konan's body, and she took longer than usual to reform. Deidara put the time to good use, pumping as much chakra as she could into the clay she was chewing. It was obvious that it would take a masterpiece to finish Konan off for good, and even though chewing the clay with a tongue that could actually taste made her want to gag, it was a small price to pay for ending this fight. And now that they had enough altitude, the chance of anyone else getting caught in the blast was almost non-existent. Konan reformed above Deidara, who seemed to be intently chewing on something. Bursting into a maelstrom of paper, Konan descended on Deidara. The mad bomber seemed to panic, looking around frantically for a way out. Nagato's right hand fluttered into existence behind Deidara, but kept her right hand flying around, forming her right arm into a spike of chakra-enhanced paper. Konan stabbed forward, hitting Deidara right in the heart with little resistance. The blonde jerked, falling slowly backwards as the paper user formed fully. Konan berated herself for letting her guard down as the Deidara she had stabbed turned stark quiet and quickly reached behind her head to grab the blue-haired origami master. Melting into a more fluid clay, the clone melded around Konan into a solid ball of white clay. As Konan tried in vain to free herself from the clay clone trap, the real Deidara rose up from inside the bird. Opening her mouth as if to talk, Deidara instead spat out a deluge of clay as if she were throwing up. The clay messily covered Konan up entirely, leaving no hope of escape. Wiping any stray clay from her lips, Deidara smirked in victory. This is real art. With her last quip delivered, Deidara fell backwards off of the hawk, activating her C4 on the way down. Looking up as she plummeted to earth, Deidara saw the large poof of white smoke as her C4 exploded and saw Konan leave quickly before diving after her. Creating an eagle to glide on, Deidara formed a basic seal to focus her chakra on detonating the C4 for real. Konan was in the process of pursuing Deidara when the dud bomb form earlier took effect. Her hands were the first thing to go, dissolving not into paper like usual, but a fine dust instead. The decay traveled up the Akatsuki member's arms as she looked on in horror. By the time she would have reached the mad bomber responsible for her fate, Konan was no more. Deidara Eagle turned and wheeled towards the others that were in the process of fighting a god, intent of assisting them in any way possible. Naruto soon learned that just because he could sense Zetsu didn't mean that the plant man wouldn't run away. Channeling as much chakra as he could to his legs to increase speed, Naruto caught up to the underground spy. Punching the ground into chunks, Naruto grabbed the Venus flytrap and threw him bodily into the air. Running through some hand seals to end this quickly, Naruto inhaled deeply. Sage Art, Vegetable Slicer. The blades of sharp wind Naruto exhaled chopped the white Akatsuki member into hundreds of indistinguishable bits. The impromptu name change to the technique was an indulgence on his part, but the results were as impressive as ever. You really shouldn't let your guard down like that. Naruto jumped away from the voice behind him as the speaker's chakra slowly began to stand out from the ambient chakra around them. And you shouldn't worn out opponents like that. Now that clone died for nothing. We have more. Standing there, perfectly untouched, was Zetsu, in all his multicolored glory. Looking more closely at the chopped-up plant, and sure enough, there were no pieces of black. More stark white clones began to rise out of the ground, only appearing to Sage Mode's sensory abilities as they stepped out of the ground entirely. Not wasting any time with talk, Naruto began to tear the Zetsus apart. Luckily, the clones were much easier to kill than the original, who stood calmly as the clone army was ripped to pieces. Once about half of the weak warriors had fallen, Zetsu finally spoke, albeit to himself. Your clones aren't doing much other than finding new ways to die. Would you like me to step in? Raising the white arm up to his chin in thought, Zetsu carefully responded. I suppose you could help a little, but don't go finishing him off right away. Clapping his hands together, Black Zetsu began his attack. Naruto wasn't at liberty to watch closely, as he was still crushing skulls and punching Zetsu clones into orbit. Wood style, deep forest emergence. The scale of the technique was infinitely smaller than when Zetsu had used it against the Three Tails, but it was no less powerful. The roots of Zetsu's lower body dug into the ground and burrowed towards Naruto, leaping out of the soil intermittently like dolphins. Naruto threw a Zetsu clone at the tree roots to gauge their power and eliminate another clone. The white Zetsu clone was mowed down and pinned to the ground by a root thicker around than he was. Blanching at the thought of that happening to him, Naruto brought his hands together in a single seal. Sage Art, Majestic Flame Devastation. The wall of flames went flying at the oncoming trees. The two met and pushed against each other, battling for dominance. In an impressive feat, the wooden trees actually withstood the inferno, though their forward progress halted. Wow, that was impressive, said Zetsu as he popped out of the wood and lunged at Naruto. The sage had plenty of time to react and snapped the sharpened stick that Zetsu was using in half as he dodged to the side. Twirling the weapon, Naruto plunged it into Zetsu's forehead, hurling the wood-style user back. Zetsu slowly stood up, a remarkable accomplishment considering the spike embedded in his face. Reaching up, Zetsu pulled the spike out and dropped it to the ground. Man, that hurt. Then maybe you shouldn't rush in like that. Naruto was confident in his ability to win, as he could always fall back to the Nine Tails chakra if he truly had to, but Zetsu's healing factor was beginning to become worrying. Naruto extended his senses, trying to see if he was far enough away from the other Akatsuki members to safely use the Nine Tails chakra. Deciding it was safe, Naruto prepared to grab hold of the volatile chakra of the most powerful tailed beast. Just as he was about to don the golden aura, tendrils of wood shot up out of the ground, taking Naruto by surprise. He had taken for granted Sage Mode's ability to sense incoming attacks, but the wood style was close enough to natural chakra of the earth that the techniques almost blended in perfectly with the surrounding soil. It was painfully obvious in the air, but by then it was too late. The wooden tendrils held Naruto by the wrists and ankles, stretching him out like a prisoner to be interrogated. Zetsu approached him, one half menacingly, the other half downright giddy. "It's been forever since I've had natural chakra. This is going to be fantastic. Your Sage Mode will mesh nicely with this body. It will make taking out your allies even easier." Naruto simply grimaced as Zetsu's white half placed a hand on his chest and began to siphon his chakra. Zetsu's main body could absorb chakra at a much faster rate than his clones, but it would still be quite a while before Naruto was out of chakra completely. Naruto tried to break out of the roots, but Black Zetsu kept the roots supplied by chakra to prevent them from breaking. Everything seemed to be going well for Zetsu and red marking began to appear around his eye, though Black Zetsu seemed unaffected. Then things went south quickly. White Zetsu's flesh began to elongate in random places, taking on a darker tint to resemble actual tree bark. Zetsu's eyes widened in horror as the tree-like growths began to consume more and more of him. The white hand that had been draining chakra recoiled and tried in vain to hold the transformation back. Black Zetsu pulled back as well, separating himself from his other half as White Zetsu completed the transformation into a large tree. Without the roots being held together by a constant supply of chakra, Naruto was easily able to break out of the wood-style trap. "I suppose in the end, you can't even depend on yourself," muttered Black Zetsu as he looked at the tree that used to be his left side. Black Zetsu turned to Naruto, who was trying to regain the chakra that White Zetsu had stolen. "I'll only warn you once, don't underestimate me." Black Zetsu made a single hand seal, and his lower body transformed into tree roots that began to attack Naruto. Naruto flipped his way through the roots, dodging the tendrils that tried to grab a hold of him. He was largely successful, though one root did manage to nab his ankle. Taking advantage of the grip, Black Zetsu smashed Naruto into the ground again and again. Sage Mode was easily able to withstand the attack, and Naruto whipped out a kunai in between hits to cut the root. Naruto landed on one hand, flinging himself to the side to avoid any more wood-style trees. Skidding to a stop, Naruto decided to end it here. Black Zetsu stared ahead as Naruto formed a single hand seal, and his roots closed in on their prey. A split second later though, and Naruto was gone in a flash of gold. In addition to his biological limitations, Black Zetsu didn't have time to widen his eyes before Naruto reappeared directly in front of him, apparently on fire and holding an orb of pure black chakra that seemed more massive than it actually was. "Impossible. We sealed the tailed beasts," exclaimed Black Zetsu before Naruto rammed the miniature tailed beast ball into his gut. Black Zetsu could feel the wood-style body that he was inhabiting begin to fall apart, and even the will of Madara that was his very essence started to fade. "Guess you missed one. Don't worry, it'll be our little secret," said Naruto before releasing the chakra. Instead of slowly grinding away, the tailed beast chakra was channeled in a massive beam that vaporized Zetsu entirely. Naruto let the Nine Tails chakra mode fade, and looked down at his tattered Akatsuki cloak. Throwing it off, Naruto donned his red and black sage's cloak before running off to try and kill a god. Kakuzu ran through some seals as the mouth on the mask over his shoulder opened with a sharp crack. Lightning style, false darkness. Kakuzu had no hope of this actually killing Nagato, that would be too easy, but it was intended to size up the god before him. With hardly any effort, Nagato swept the black chakra of the Ten Tails in front of the beam of lightning, which hit the chakra and didn't emerge. "That's a stupid name for a technique," grumbled Sasori, before launching a wave of fire out of his palms. The flames disappeared the moment they touched the corrosive chakra as well, but it did keep Nagato in place. The best thing about having the flamethrowers on his palms was that Sasori's fingers were still free to control his puppets, albeit with less control than normal. Secret red technique, golden darkness. The sand of the two Kazekage puppets he had wove together and flew towards the former leader of Akatsuki, both black as pitch and as bright as the sun at the same time. The stream of mixed sand came in from both sides, aiming to take advantage of the flames that were keeping the Ten Tails chakra busy in the front. Unfortunately, the massive attack that would have sent armies running in fear was defeated by Nagato simply raising his hand, stopping the sand for a split second before it was sent flying away. Sasori had to cease the onslaught of flames in order to better control his Kazekage puppets. The alternative was not having the control over the gold dust and iron sand he needed to prevent accidentally poisoning his allies as they moved into attack. Kisame and Orochimaru came in from the right and the left as the stream of sand parted around them without leaving so much as a scratch. Kisame had fused with Samata, and the chakra-eating properties that protected the legendary sword from being destroyed by the liquid black hole around Nagato before protected him now as he battered away at the shield with his forearms. Orochimaru meanwhile, tried to hit Nagato through the deadly chakra with his own legendary sword. Kusanagi was able to cut anything, and it was covered by a poison deadlier than anything even Sasori had ever created. Unfortunately, the liquid nature of the chakra meant that the cuts left by Kusanagi were about as permanent as a cut in the ocean. This also left the sword unable to really defend against much, and Orochimaru was constantly backpedaling in an attempt to not be erased from existence. "Fucking die already," shouted Hidan as he threw what remained of his scythe's handle like a spear. Hidan pulled on the cord attached to the spike as the black chakra came up to eat the rest of the Jashinist's weapon, stopping the spike less than an inch away from its demise and yanking it back to his hand. Hidan kept running though, taking advantage of the window presented by the window Nagato opened to retain some visibility. Kakuzu was impressed by the thought that had apparently gone into Hidan's plan, and the bounty hunter was downright floored when it worked. The scratch healed almost instantly and Hidan got his arm cut off for his troubles, but the immortal zealot had managed to procure a drop or two of blood. The cord to his weapon had been severed by the black chakra closing it along with Hidan's right arm, but he had apparently even thought that out as well, and Hidan whipped the severed cord to wrap around his arm and pull it back with him as he retreated. Orochimaru and Kisame did likewise, not eager to remain in the line of fire for longer than needed. The former hidden waterfall ninja felt the need to congratulate his partner for once. That was surprising well thought out. "End it now though, we don't have time for your rituals." Hidan grinned at the praise and raised the spike high into the air, still held by his severed arm. "Praise to Jashin, for allowing me to strike down this blasphemer in his name." Just as he was about to bring down the bloodied weapon and ingest the blood for his ritual, a laser of pure chakra enveloped the detached limb and weapon. When the beam faded, any blood on the weapon was gone, and the scythe handle itself was melted down slag. The Akatsuki members looked up to see Nagato's hand reverting back to the 5 digits and a palm that they all had from a small cannon that had no doubt been responsible for destroying the blood. Hidan brought down the slag and frantically started chewing on it, apparently hoping to get some blood out of it. Unfortunately, some of the melted weapon was still molten. "Oh sweet Jashin, that burns." Kakuzu put my arm back on. "I'll show this bastard what happens when he burns my mouth." Any other day, Kakuzu would have objected, or done an intentionally shoddy job, but these were dire straits, and a thread snaked its way over to sew the severed arm back on as lightning continued to fire over his head to try and keep Nagato at bay. Sasori attempted to use his sand to exploit any openings, but between Orochimaru, Kisame, and now the rearmed Hidan, there wasn't much room for his sand to go on the offensive. Instead, the puppeteer opted to use his sand defensively, blocking the black rods and acting as platforms for the other 3 close-range combatants to maneuver with. It was largely unsatisfying, and he actually found himself wishing for the other to fall back so he could stretch his collection. Nagato was caught off guard for the first time in the fight when Manda burst out of the ground beneath him, attempting to swallow Akatsuki's former leader and anything that was too close. Nagato raised his hands up as the jaws of the serpent closed around him to force the snake's jaws open. Manda dislocated his jaw to keep it from being ripped off, and the leader of the snakes fell to the ground, leaving Nagato inexplicably hovering in the sky. The god clapped his hands together, slowly pulling them apart to reveal a minuscule black orb. The sphere floated in the air as Nagato gently descended back to the ground, where Manda was wrapped around the entire area, leaving no escape. Suddenly, Manda began to feel lighter and lighter before being lifted off the ground entirely. Looking up, the small black orb of condensed gravity was pulling every bit of loose rock towards it, and even some rock that wasn't loose at all. The Akatsuki members were stuck to the ground with chakra, but the ground they were anchored to didn't have that advantage. "Aim your strongest attacks at the center," shouted Sasori. "If we can destroy the weak point, we can escape this." Sasori started the barrage with a wave of gold dust and iron sand. Kakuzu followed up with an electrified blast of water, and Kisame launched a frenzy of sharks made of water. Manda struck out with his own body, and Orochimaru's sword elongated to ridiculous proportions to stab at the black orb of death. The attacks all collided in a magnificent explosion that Deidara would have been proud of, and the pieces of rock that the Akatsuki members stood on stopped rising for a second before falling back to earth. Once they landed, the landscape was even more devastated than it had been before. Nagato seemed mildly amused at the destruction of his technique. He ran through some familiar hand seals and slammed his palms on the ground, summoning a giant two-headed dog and an equally enormous rhino in a cloud of smoke. The rhino barreled towards the recovering Akatsuki members, who were trying to catch their breath and their chakra after escaping the miniature moon. The rhino was dispersed in a cloud of smoke before it could reach them, however, by massive purple viper falling from the sky. Manda broke his fall with the other massive summon, and began to square off against the dog, a little singed and sore, but otherwise no worse for wear. The dog went in biting, but Manda slithered around the straightforward attack and wrapped himself around the dog, holding it in place. Manda's mouth opened wide as he sunk his fangs into the creature, injecting it with his deadly venom. The poison was deadly to anything, even when diluted, and would have no doubt killed any regular summon. The two-headed hound had a trick though, and the attack caused it to simply grow another head and split into three separate dogs. The added mass stretched Manda's coils thin, but he managed to hold onto the dogs, who continued to nip at any part of him they could reach. The leader of the snakes could feel himself being pulled back to Ryuchi Cave as the injuries sustained by diving into a barrage of high-leveled ninjutsu began to take effect. At this point it was only stubborn pride keeping him on the battlefield. Kisame noticed the struggle, and rode towards the struggling summons on a wave of water. The smaller wave was the product of a technique designed to increase the mobility of his fused form and keep the even fishier ninja hydrated. Nearing the Battle of Giants, Kisame ran his rough skin against each of the dogs, draining them of all the chakra that had been used to summon them. His blue skin bulked up slightly with the massive quantities of chakra he had absorbed, and Nagato's puppies disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Sensing his battle was over as well, Manda returned to his home as well. The Akatsuki members faced off against the man who had led them for years, back to square one in this fight. Just as they were about to recommit themselves to the offensive, Nagato's black chakra moved to block an incoming wave of water. They all looked up to find the attacker, and were greeted by the sight of an exhausted red toad. The most interesting thing though, was the fact that unlike everything else in existence, the black Ten-Tails chakra seemed unable to absorb the water bullet, instead blocking it like any other shield. Orochimaru's golden snake eyes widened at the sight, realizing that they might have a way to actually harm him other than Kusanagi and Seimata, which hadn't been doing much so far. A hand seal had him body flickering to the toad's location while the other Akatsuki members kept on the offensive. Kakuzu and Sasori provided ranged support for Hidan and Kisame, and pulled the close-range combatants out of the way with sand and threads whenever things got too close. Tell me a little froggy, was that technique just now fueled by natural chakra? And where is Jiraiya? Asked Orochimaru, dispensing of any urge to mess with his former teammates' summons given the urgency of the situation. Wait, Jiraiya's here? Asked Gamakichi in surprise. That jerk still owes me candy from last time. Gamakichi looked up into Orochimaru's glare, and decided to just answer the questions. Why yeah, that was natural chakra. It ain't sage mode or anything, but I'm pretty good at drawing it in real quick for a water bullet and stuff. Orochimaru's grin was downright disturbing, and Gamakichi nervously spoke up again. That was the last of my chakra though, so I'll just be going now. Orochimaru ignored the puff of smoke behind him as he turned to survey the battlefield. The Sannin wasn't able to handle sage mode in a stolen body, a fact he had discovered only after taking a new body to prolong his life. Luckily, the mad scientist in him had discovered a way around the limitations of his body. Hugo's bloodline allowed him to do something impossible, gather natural chakra constantly. It wasn't great enough in volume or mixed correctly to enter sage mode, but he was far more in touch with nature than anyone else in the world. Unfortunately for him, when the natural chakra stored became too great, it was released, giving Hugo great strength and reverting him to a more violent personality to better empty his reserves of natural chakra. By utilizing Hugo's blood, Orochimaru was able to create his cursed seal. Any body he took from then on was still unable to use actual sage mode, but Hugo's slightly less powerful transformation was easily accessible. He had never really had reason to care that it was run off of natural chakra until now, but the ability to make his techniques immune to the liquid black hole surrounding Nagato was worth it. Concentrating on the black mark hidden beneath his most recent body's skin, Orochimaru allowed the transformation to take over. "Let's see how the god deals with a technique that transcends snakes to become a dragon god," mumbled Orochimaru. Nagato's battle paused as the combatants looked up to where the toad had been a second ago to see the massive 8-headed white snake that dwarfed even Manda. Kisame and Hidan wisely got out of the way as the snake barreled down on Nagato with a speed that a creature that size should not possess. All of the black orbs around Nagato fused together to form a massive sword of deadly chakra shaped like a double helix. The pitch-black sword swung horizontally in an attempt to cut off all of the snake's heads in one go, but the white serpent reeled back to dodge. One of the mouths near the middle opened wide to reveal Orochimaru fused to the bottom of the snake's mouth. His curse seal was ridiculous compared to the others, even Hugo's, but Orochimaru never was one to give the best toys to others. Orochimaru brought an elongated sword of Kusanagi down at Nagato, who simply moved to the side to avoid the downward swing. The black blade stabbed outwards to sever one of the snake's heads, and Orochimaru winced in pain as the feeling came towards him. The loss wouldn't translate to losing any parts of his body when he transformed back, but it still hurt. Two of the mouths next to him opened wide and launched a massive fireball enhanced by a wave of wind. The collaboration technique roared past the Ten Tails chakra that tried to block it, intent on incinerating Nagato. The red head was obscured by the inferno, which died down far more quickly than it should have. When the flames disappeared, Nagato was left standing with one hand outstretched as if he had stopped the technique with one hand. Three of the remaining heads on the snake struck out with the speed of lightning, only to be rewarded with a black sword severing them in a spray of blood. The snake was 4 heads down, and only had 4 left. Orochimaru grit his teeth and prepared the best technique he could under the conditions. The 3 remaining heads that wouldn't kill him if they launched the technique fired off blasts of water, lightning, and wind so massive that they put Kakuzu's attacks to shame. The 3 combined into a fast-moving wave of paralyzing death, and was quickly absorbed into Nagato's hand once more. This time though, Kisame and Hidan took advantage of the fact that such a devastating technique was only a temporary distraction. Hidan lost his other arm this time as Nagato attempted to react in time, but both he and Kisame landed solid blows against the self-proclaimed god that would have ended the fight against any normal opponent. Draining chakra and gaining precious blood that Hidan promptly licked off of his black spike. Unfortunately, Nagato was not a normal opponent. Hidan stood up to start drawing the ritual circle in his own blood so he could just stab himself and end this. Before either he or Kisame could react though, Nagato had recovered from his injury and moved incredibly fast right behind Hidan. Placing his hand solemnly on Hidan's head, Nagato inhaled deeply before yanking something out. It appeared to be an outline of Hidan made entirely of chakra, and the Jashinist fell to the ground immediately upon its removal. Orochimaru noticed this and struck out with all 4 remaining head of the 8 branches technique, trying to end the fight while Hidan before Nagato could return any attention to the snake Sanin. One quick turn and slice was enough to separate the remaining heads from the body, which writhed in pain before becoming still. Orochimaru ejected himself from the mouth of the white serpent midair at great speed. Its purpose served, the black sword melted back into the orbs of Ten Tails chakra that hovered ominously behind Nagato's back. "I believe you've pushed me as far as you will. I grow bored with this attempt to fight me, as if you were even close to my level, and we'll end it at once. Suffice to say, you won't be alright." Naruto hadn't realized just how far away Zetsu had lured him until he had to run all the way back. The sheer amount of chakra being thrown around wasn't helping the sage get an accurate picture of what was going on with the others. He could detect the pulses of chakra from individual techniques, but Nagato's omnipresent chakra prevented Naruto from sensing individuals and locations from this distance. Sensing a familiar and volatile chakra coming towards him quickly, Naruto held up his hand. Deidara grabbed a hold of him and swung him onto the clay bird that continued towards Nagato's location without missing a beat. "Can you sense anything? Obviously they didn't kill Nagato, even I can feel the chakra, but how are they doing, yeah? I really can't tell. Nagato's chakra is still there and I can sense the others are still alive, but not much." Naruto's eyes widened in shock and his mouth dropped open slightly. "Hurry. What just happened?" asked Deidara frantically as her clay mount began to go even faster than its previous breakneck pace. "Hidan's chakra signature just vanished," said Naruto. "I don't know how, but it's gone." "No way. Hidan's immortal, yeah?" asked Deidara. "There's just no way he's dead." "Either way, we have to get there now," said Naruto as the color drained from his face. He hoped that they could stop Nagato without having to pull out all the stops. But he was beginning to fear that Akatsuki couldn't stop their former leader even if he used the Nine Tails chakra that had so easily dominated his fight with Zetsu. After all, if he could kill Hidan, Nagato might not be cocky in his power, but rightfully confident. Kakuzu was shocked to see Hidan dead. It was such a strange and alien concept that the swearing Jashinist could be killed that he figured the closest thing to an immortal in the world would be the last of them to go down, and even then only being incapacitated. On a positive note, now Kakuzu knew not to let Nagato touch him at all. That wasn't much of a consolation prize though. He found himself glad that he had comrades on the way to assist them in fighting this monster, and wondered when Naruto and Deidara would be getting here. Kakuzu found it odd that he didn't consider the very real possibility of them abandoning the members of Akatsuki that had stayed to fight Nagato for even a second. Nor did he think that Zetsu and Konan would win, despite his views on experience prevailing above all. The bomber and the sage were powerful allies, and he only hoped that they would be able to make it in time. The bounty hunter swore to himself that he would be standing when they arrived. "You came close, but none can stand before the might of a god for long," said Nagato calmly as he blasted his former subordinates away simply by narrowing his ringed eyes. The four Akatsuki members were sent flying head over heels by the raw power that collided with them, and not even Orochimaru could slither around the attack. The force subsided, and Orochimaru skidded to a halt some distance away. He observed Nagato grow another limb, similar to before when he destroyed the remains of Hidan's scythe. Orochimaru's eye widened as he spit out a spare body just as the previous one was incinerated in a beam of light he couldn't even follow. The Sannin didn't even bother to predict where the blasts would hit, and slithered along the ground in random directions as fast as he could. Not looking where he was going, however, had an unfortunate side effect. When the blast stopped, Orochimaru stood up, only to come face to face with Nagato, who quickly reached out with his right hand. Reacting with the speed of a striking viper, Orochimaru grabbed a hold of Nagato's wrist with both hands in an attempt to prevent his soul form being ripped out. He absent-mindedly wondered if Nagato could rip his soul via his arms, maybe even taking just the arms, but decided that would just be stupid, not to mention weird. Nagato tried to raise his left hand, but Orochimaru opened his mouth wider than should be biologically possible and mentally commanded Kusanagi to extend out. The legendary blade impaled the god's wrist and continued on to stick deeply into the ground. Orochimaru worried for a second that his guess had been wrong, and that Nagato would simply grow another arm and remove his soul, but the seconds passed, and all that was proven lacking was Orochimaru's strength as Nagato's hand inched slowly towards the Sannin's chest. But not his theories. Nagato had ridiculously strong abilities even beyond the black chakra of the Ten Tails. He never would have united the members of Akatsuki under him as pain otherwise. But whether it was the power of the abilities themselves or the added stress of holding back the Ten Tails, Nagato could only use one ability at a time. Grinning in victory, Orochimaru breathed out a thick purple smog around Kusanagi. The poison was a potent, not that it would have any effect on Orochimaru, but one that would likely slow Nagato down, if not outright kill him. Nagato tried to pull back, but now Orochimaru wasn't holding Nagato's wrist back, he was holding it in place. The snake Sannin wasn't as feared as he was for relying on one plan though, and he decided to enact all of them at once just in case being the Ten Tails Jinchuriki came with some kind of toxic immunity privilege. The palm on his hand opened, biting down on Nagato's wrist and injecting it with Orochimaru's chakra. The chakra wasn't naturally explosive like Deidara, but the ability to manipulate the chakra was still there. Commanding Nagato's arm to remain still for a second wouldn't work for long, but it would do for the time being. Orochimaru had Kusanagi contract in the opposite direction, the hilt shooting out of his mouth to keep Nagato stuck while Orochimaru executed his next move. Another body emerged, fingertips alight with small flames. Let's see if we can do something about that pesky Ten Tails. Five-pronged seal. Orochimaru's hand shot out at blinding speeds to add additional pillars of support to the Ten-Tail seal in hopes of cutting off Nagato's connection to the beast, or at least hampering it in some way should he survive the poison on Kusanagi and the poison in the air. Centimeters before Orochimaru's finger came into contact with Nagato's skin, a blast of chakra sent Orochimaru flying and dispersed the poison in the air. Stiffly moving his arm as Orochimaru's chakra left his system, Nagato removed Kusanagi, the wound closing up quickly without so much as a drop of blood escaping the wound. Tumbling head over heels, Orochimaru tumbled to a stop, only to be enveloped in a brilliant beam of pure chakra. When the dust settled, Orochimaru was gone. A smoking crater was all that remained of the Sannin. As Nagato's right hand reassembled into a 5-digit appendage, The Black Ten-Tails chakra formed a ring around him to dissolve the poison ninja wire, all but invisible to the naked eye that tried to wrap around him. The corrosive chakra did little to stop the barrage of poison weapons from being launched against him, but they did little against the impenetrable shield of chakra that broke down all the senbon and kunai. Nagato looked to see the two puppets that dodged his counterattack fervently, not letting themselves be touched anymore. The two were relatively simple humanoids clad in red cloaks with fur collars. The female-looking puppet had long brown hair while the male puppet had short red hair similar to Sasori's, though it was a common enough hair color in the hidden sand. The limp ninja wire that used to connect the two had been severed, and the two drew their own unique weapons. Nagato was surprised to see an ornate serrated katana and a custom-made kunai covered with. These two puppets showed more care put into them than even the Kazekage puppets that Sasori had been using, which made Nagato wary of what powerful abilities they had, and why they hadn't used them yet. "I suspect you gathered information on our abilities via Zetsu. Unfortunately for you, I have plenty of secrets. Though I don't really want to see mother and father destroyed, so I'll just bring my best against you. It took a lot of work to get these out of the hidden sand, I'll have you know," said Sasori, as he removed the scroll and unfurled it. The 10 seals exploded in a cloud of smoke. "The name might seem strange, but I didn't feel like doing away with tradition. White Secret Art, Chikamatsu Collection. I've yet to make any puppet this powerful. Each one could elevate a lesser puppeteer to S rank. In the hands of a master, they'll spell you doom." Clad in bright white cloaks, the puppets stood out against Sasori's usual red. Each one was unique, and Nagato was now outnumbered as Kisame joined the puppets, hefting Saimata menacingly. Twitching his fingers like a conductor, Sasori had 5 of the puppets, joined by Kisame, rush the self-proclaimed god. A puppet with long black hair shot its own hand off, connected via cable, and grabbed a hold of an orb that a red-faced puppet spat out. 4 giant chakra blades began to rotate quickly around the sphere, which was swung at Nagato. Raising his hand casually, Nagato drained the chakra from the deadly blades, and caught the orb before yanking the black-haired puppet towards him. Before Nagato's victim could reach him, however, a bald puppet with several holes in its head burst forth under Nagato's outstretched arm. The purpose of the holes quickly became apparent when spiked cord shot out, aiming to impale Nagato multiple times. He could easily survive the hit, but Nagato wasn't one to tolerate an image of weakness, especially now that he was a god. Shinra Tensei. The spiked cord bounced off the protective barrier before it burst out, launching the puppet and smashing it into dozens of pieces. A single twitch of Sasori's left thumb was enough to snap the whole puppet back together in a heartbeat. A heartbeat that Nagato used to snap off his hand at the wrist and reveal a rack of small missiles. The projectiles launched towards Sasori himself, only to be sliced in half midair by a red-haired puppet wielding 2 massive swords. The puppet landed on one of her swords as the bomb exploded in the air behind her. A massive tornado began to suck at Nagato, who looked in the direction of the suction to see 3 of the puppets standing in a small pyramid and generating the winds. Anchoring himself to the ground with chakra, Nagato fought the suction, and barely had time to react to the threads that burst out of the ground beneath him. Nagato jumped to prevent Kakuzu from grabbing a hold of him and ripping out his heart, and had to channel the Predapath to absorb the electrified water that came shooting towards him. Morphing the Ten-Tails chakra into a long spear, Nagato impales Kakuzu, who coughed up blood around his threads as his second-to-last heart was destroyed. The inverted tornado grabbed hold of Nagato before he could recover from jumping, and he began to hurtle towards the 3 puppets. Nagato prepared the Ten-Tails chakra to destroy the puppets, but they broke apart right as Nagato was about to reach them. The momentum kept carrying him forwards though, heading towards Kisame, who swung Saimata down sideways to maximize the surface area of his blow. Forced to use the black chakra defensively, Nagato stopped Kisame's strike dead in its tracks. Kisame merely smirked as the hilt of his blade extended, growing spikes and aiming to strike Nagato under his guard. The redhead leaned to one side, and gained nothing more than a cut on his stomach that healed almost immediately. Kisame jumped back before the dissolving chakra could strike around Saimata in a similar fashion. Before the Ten-Tails chakra could retreat to its standard position as 10 orbs hovering behind him, 2 puppets with massive fists came in from either side to try and smash Nagato's face in. The punches were stopped by Nagato's outstretched palms, and 2 more hands that sprouted shot the puppets with a powerful blast of chakra. One of the puppets grew another hand before it died and grabbed hold of Nagato's 2 hands, while the other puppet had to be satisfied with restraining only one arm. Nagato's ringed eyes widened as he looked up to see a blanket of lava descending upon him. Growing 2 more hands, he blasted the lava with missiles until the blanket of fiery rock broke into a rain of hot globules. Freeing his hands from the puppets, Nagato began to drain the chakra from the mist that began to surround him as it started to eat away at his skin. As the mist faded, Nagato looked up to see the Mizukage looking back at him with her golden eyes, ringed by purple mascara. "You truly did a number on my previous body, and I had to jump into this one before I could make the modifications I wanted to. Now I'll be spending the next 3 years as a woman. Granted, you'll be spending eternity in a shallow grave. You'll need to do better if you want to kill a Sannin." "Kukaku," said the person who was most certainly not the Mizukage. "My mistake," said Nagato calmly. "I'll be sure to bring my best to the table this time." "Well, the best that you deserve anyway." Nagato rushed forward, swinging the black chakra down to bisect the now female Sannin. Orochimaru brought his hand to the side in a sweeping motion, and the Kusanagi blade levitated up from its previous position to intercept the chakra and knock it off course. Grabbing the hilt of the legendary sword, Orochimaru swung it across Nagato's body, and Akatsuki's former leader was forced to jump back or risk being bisected. Orochimaru would have shot his tongue out to grab Nagato and drag him back into the blow, or spat out a wave of 1,000 snakes to chase him down, but neither was possible at the moment with his new unaugmented body. So he settled for a ball of lava that Nagato quickly drained the chakra from. He was still forced to deal with a small boulder coming at him, and the force from the rock transferred to Nagato as he caught it to prevent actually being struck. Unfortunately, Kisame and Kakuzu took full advantage of the fact that Orochimaru had taken up both Nagato's hands and his more versatile abilities for a moment to drain chakra. Kisame held the Ten Tails chakra back with Seimata, while Kakuzu hardened his fist and literally launched a punch at Nagato. Nagato might not be able to launch blasts of gravity, or shoot chakra lasers, or suck out souls at the moment, and his Ten Tails chakra was holding back Orochimaru and Kisame's legendary swords at the moment, but he still had access to the most basic on ninja skills. Dodging. Nagato easily sidestepped the punch, dropped the rock that used to be a lava-style technique, and raised a hand towards Kakuzu. Bando Tensei. Kakuzu couldn't fight the force that began pulling him towards the self-made god, and he readied a water-style technique with his final heart from the 5 he had started out with. Before he could finish the technique though, Nagato had placed a hand on his chest. Still channeling the Deva path, Nagato couldn't rip out Kakuzu's soul. Instead, he shot a pitch-black rod out of his sleeve to impale the second half of the zombie combo. Orochimaru and Kisame were blasted back as Nagato turned his attention to them, allowing Kakuzu's body to fall to the ground. The ex-Mist and Leaf ninja skidded to a halt near Sasori, who had regrouped his puppets to assess the damage done to them by Nagato. Orochimaru began to sprint back towards Nagato, who simply scoffed at the Sannin's recklessness. Sasori's eyes widened at Orochimaru's actions, and Kisame was the first to find his voice as he ran after Orochimaru to provide backup. "Damn it, Orochimaru. We need a plan. Rushing in will only get you killed." As Orochimaru drew nearer, reaching back with the sword of Kusanagi to strike off Nagato's head, Nagato maneuvered his black chakra to block the blow. Then the chakra faltered as a sharp pain arose from his back. Turning his head, he saw Kakuzu with his fist buried in the former Akatsuki leader's back, skin hardened and very much alive. "Thanks for the extra heart, Orochimaru," said Kakuzu quietly, more to let Nagato know how he had been tricked than to actually thank the Sannin. Orochimaru's sword found its target, and separated Nagato's head from his body in a spray of blood. "Think nothing of it. The old thing was failing me anyway," said the Sannin cheekily. Kisame and Sasori were both impressed that Orochimaru had a plan that worked so well, and furious that he hadn't told them. Any good ninja kept his guard up at all times, and the practice saved Orochimaru's life, though he still lost an arm. Looking at the god he had presumed dead for a second, Orochimaru found his neck connected to his head by the majority of the black chakra. A small amount had remained to slice off the Sannin's limb, an injury usually inconsequential, but far more severe without the ability to reattach limbs with the snakes kept in his body. Limb reattachment was apparently a skill Nagato had in spades, and he addressed them all as he had rejoined the body it had shortly left. A valiant effort that would have certainly killed any ninja of any skill level. Even my old self would have been done in. But I'm no longer a ninja. You face a god, and to even harm a god is something you cannot hope to accomplish in a million years," said Nagato as he glared down the 4 Akatsuki members. Then Nagato put the final nail in the coffin by flaring his chakra and killing intent. Even Orochimaru was paralyzed by the sheer chakra and malice he possessed. Nagato dashed in with a black blade in each arm to finish off Kakuzu and Orochimaru, when his black chakra was reallocated to stop the barrage of small birds that flew down on him and attempted to explode. They faded into the liquid black hole that surrounded Nagato protectively, but the human missile didn't. With gravity augmenting his speed, Naruto hit the black shield like a freight train, and it buckled under the force of a Sage Mode enhanced blow. Naruto finally broke through, though greatly slowed, with his red and black sage cloak billowing behind him. "Sorry, but don't heroes always arrive fashionably late?" said Naruto while exploiting the element of surprise for all it was worth, hitting Nagato in the face while he was still stunned by the fact that someone had broken through his defenses. It was so surreal, Nagato forgot that he had fallbacks like the Deva Path for a moment, and was sent flying for his momentary empty-headedness. Deidara flew down to just a few feet over the ground next to Naruto. "None of you have personal beef with Jinchuriki, yeah?" she asked, addressing the members of Akatsuki. "I killed the Three Tails Jinchuriki, but that was mostly because he was a tyrant and had me killing my comrades. That was a personal fight with Yagura, had nothing to do with him being a Jinchuriki, though I'm not a big fan of the Ten Tails Jinchuriki." "Why the hell are you asking now?" said Kisame, annoyed that Deidara seemed to be ignoring the more imminent problem as Nagato slowly got to his feet. Orochimaru shrugged his shoulders, and Deidara was noticeably freaked out by the Snake Sanin's raspy voice coming out of the young Mizukage's feminine mouth. "I've never once killed a Jinchuriki. Except for my research that one time. My reason for killing Jinchuriki was that it was either orders or it meant a new puppet. I'm in the same boat as Kisame," said Sasori flippantly, more interested in doing some battlefield repairs on the two puppets that Nagato had destroyed during the fight. Kakuzu grunted non-committally. "They make good money, but they're usually not worth the trouble." Deidara turned to Naruto and gave him a thumbs up as he faced down Nagato, who was looking at Naruto with a look of pure rage on his face. "You dare strike me? I am the reincarnation of the Sage of the Six Paths, created of all ninjutsu. I am a god," shouted Nagato, obviously agitated by the fact that Naruto had inflicted an injury that created lasting pain. Even being decapitated only hurt for a split second, but the simple punch from Sage Mode was capable of treating Nagato like a normal human. And as a god, he couldn't let that stand. "Sage of Six Paths, huh?" asked Naruto, smirking at Nagato's unhinged behavior. "Well, you might have the eyes, but you're missing two vital ingredients." A bit of confusion shone through Nagato's divine wrath, and Naruto decided to enlighten him. 1. The Sage on Six Paths was just that, a sage. And I'm not sensing a drop of natural chakra running through your body. 2. You aren't really the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails. You're missing a bit. Impossible. Akatsuki captured every tailed beast. The statue began to revive, and I sealed it into myself. "This chakra is proof," shouted Nagato as he gestured to the black orbs of chakra floating around him. "Are you sure? Absolutely positive you found every Jinchuriki? Because I have proof you didn't." Naruto decided to cut off any response by flaring the Nine Tails chakra. The Akatsuki members were all shocked at the familiar chakra of a tailed beast, save Deidara, who had seen the transformation. "I'm the real Nine Tails Jinchuriki. And since I'm both a sage and a Jinchuriki, I'm as much a reincarnation of the Sage of Six Paths as you are." Naruto's claim rubbed Nagato the wrong way, and he decided to show Naruto just how wrong he was. "No. I am the Sage of Six Paths. I am a god in human form. I am invincible." The black orbs of the Ten Tails chakra coalesced around Nagato's hands as he clapped them together, and the sheer density of the chakra formed a small crater underneath Nagato. With a loud shout, he threw the black ball of chakra into the sky, and the effect was immediate. Even as it was still rising, the empowered Chibaku Tensei began to pull up massive chunks of the ground. Deidara bird was pulled in slowly as it fought against the pull by flapping as hard as it could in a tug of war it was losing. The other members of Akatsuki didn't fare much better, being pulled into the epicenter of the new satellite that Nagato was creating. Remembering the strategy from before, Kakuzu, Orochimaru, Kisame, and Sasori all launched their strongest attacks at the black center of the technique, but this time the orb remained unharmed, protected and enhanced by the black chakra of the Ten Tails. Naruto looked at Nagato before dashing towards the black orb in the sky by jumping between the pieces of debris. A similarly sized black sphere swirled to life in his hand, and the Nine Tails chakra around his arm extended to thrust the miniature tailed beast ball directly into the center of the Chibaku Tensei. Just because the tailed beast ball was smaller than the massive orbs created by tailed beasts didn't mean it had any less power though, and it probably had even more condensed into the size of a grapefruit. The resulting explosion of the tailed beast ball impacting its target was almost as large as the finished moon would have been. Just as before, the boulders lifted up by the Sage of Six Paths technique began to fall as the chakra orb in its center was destroyed by the raw power of the strongest tailed beast. Nagato was less than pleased with this, and shot a blast of pure chakra at the other Jinchuriki while his speed was limited to the rate of gravity. Before the searing beam of energy could hit him, Naruto was pushed out of the way by a white-clad puppet. The blast was enough to vaporize the legendary puppet, and Sasori was glad he was physically incapable of crying at the irreparable damage to such an artifact of his craft. Naruto landed lightly on his feet as the black chakra reformed from the particles in the air around Nagato. Naruto turned when he was addressed by Kakuzu, who looked dead on his feet and was breathing heavily. That black chakra destroys everything but natural chakra, and he can use other abilities like those lasers, but he can only use one at a time. If he touches you, he can tear out your soul, and he can blast you away with some kind of powerful force. He summoned some strange beasts earlier, but he hasn't in a while. And he can absorb chakra, even natural chakra with his bare hands. Seeing Naruto's questioning look, Kakuzu sighed. I'm running on one very old, nearly dead heart. I'm afraid I won't be of much help. Alright. Thanks for the intel, but I got this, so try not to die, said Naruto, turning his golden gaze to Nagato. Feeling a powerful presence in his mind rearing up, Naruto closed his eyes and retreated to his mind for a moment. Time passed slowly here, and he could subdue the Nine Tails if it was escaping before Nagato even wondered why his opponent was closing his eyes. What do you want, Fox? I have a name, you know, replied the Nine Tails indignantly from behind its cage. Not that I'd ever tell you. Growling as if he was still debating giving Naruto the information, the mightiest tailed beast continued. If you can manage to free my brethren and unite me with the rest of my chakra, I'll willingly cooperate with you for long enough to utterly crush that fake Sage of Six Paths. Naruto raised an eyebrow in curiosity. It wasn't often that the Nine Tails offered anything more than a quick death, and it was even stranger that he would be willing to give Naruto the time of day, let alone help him in a fight. How would I go about freeing the other tailed beasts? I'm not exactly the best at seals. The Nine Tails scoffed at Naruto's lack of knowledge. I should have known you humans would be next to useless. The best way would be to release me and let me do it, but if you insist on struggling your way through this, you should be able to pull tailed beast's chakra out of him like you stole mine before. Once out, we should return to the forms the Sage of Six Paths gave us when we were born. Naruto was still suspicious of the Nine Tails, but there was no real risk to listening to the tailed beast. Opening his eyes in the real world, Naruto rushed the former leader of Akatsuki. The black chakra of the Ten Tails bent under the force of the sage's blows, but without the added force and the element of surprise, the shield held. Nagato raised a hand and lowered his guard to retaliate. Naruto tried to exploit the opening but was shocked when the force sent him flying despite the power of Sage Mode and the Nine Tails chakra mode combined. Naruto recovered though, and nodded to Deidara. She nodded back before tossing him a beautifully crafted clay toad and sending a wave of small locusts flying and jumping and crawling towards Nagato while Naruto sprinted back in. Nagato ran through a set of seals and countered the attack with a horde of actual locusts, the only differences being the small Rinnegan and piercings in the insects. Nagato got the Ten Tails chakra up just in time to deflect the blow from Naruto, though he punched through the barrier with his superior strength and speed. The hordes of locusts began to clash, with the real ones eating the clay and the clay ones blowing up the flesh and blood insects. The summoned bugs also had an effect incredibly similar to the iron sand that Sasori used so much, clogging up the workings of Chikamatsu's collection. Sasori rushed in, protecting himself from a similar fate by incinerating everything with the flamethrowers mounted in his palms to rescue his puppets. Deidara's force was smaller, but her army of bugs was bolstered by new forces as quickly as she could make them, and each one caused more damage with its explosion. Sneaking a bird into the mix, Deidara smirked. Naruto meanwhile, was still trying to even lay a hand on Nagato. The redhead could see the extensions of natural chakra that Naruto tried to hit him with, and the speed boost from the Nine Tails chakra was only usable in straight lines for quick bursts. It could likely be used more effectively in close quarters combat, but Naruto hadn't used the chakra all that much, and as such hadn't really had a chance to practice and experiment. His inexperience was Nagato's game, and the Rinnegan-bearing Jinchuriki counterattacked by smashing Naruto across the face with the black chakra of the Ten Tails. The blow sent him into the ground in a cloud of dust and small rocks. Nagato raised his hand to absorb the chakra, form the Jinchuriki and complete the 10 tails within him, but was forced to wheel around and drain the chakra of the clay bird that came diving down. Drained of the chakra that allowed it to move and explode, the eagle fell to the ground and shattered. Naruto used the time to recover though, and used his speed to smash Nagato across the face and sent him flying. Nagato halted his flight path by stabbing the ground with a black rod and pulling himself down. Glaring at Naruto, he almost missed the incoming attack. Water style, Shark Geyser. The black chakra absorbed the eruption of water from below as Nagato jumped up to stand on a floating disc of it, and Kisame's strike with Saimata was stopped with a blast of gravity that sent the shark flying. Kisame would have lost his weapon from the power of the blast, but Saimata refused to be separated from its master and dug spikes from the hilt into Kisame's hand. Kisame grinned with his sharpened teeth as he landed on top of Saimata's hilt after digging it into the ground to stop his momentum. Naruto noticed what Kisame had done, and took advantage of it. With the black chakra still holding back the seemingly limitless amount of water gushing forth from the ground and Nagato unable to absorb chakra while using his force manipulation abilities. There was no defense and Naruto rushed in a golden blur and slammed his palm into Nagato's chest. The small toad in his hand that he had infused with Sage Mode chakra croaked once and then exploded as Naruto grabbed hold of Nagato to keep him in place. The force of the explosion was massive, and even Naruto struggled to remain standing through the blast. The remaining locusts were killed by the heat from the explosion, and Kisame was glad he had been launched to a safe distance by Nagato's attack. The durability granted by virtue of being the 10 tails Jinchuriki kept Nagato alive, but his entire body was racked in pain as he was sent flying away. Nagato looked up groggily, and was snapped back to full alert by what he saw. Stretching the distance between him and Naruto was a massive cord of red and black chakra. Realizing that the chakra was his, Nagato's eyes widened and he grabbed a hold of the chakra and tried to pull it back into himself. Naruto had created extra hands with the 9 tails chakra to help extract the ridiculous amount of chakra, and Nagato returned the favor by sprouting 4 more arms and trying to pull it back in. Kisame, now. Nagato looked up at Naruto's shout, and saw Kisame descending with Saimata raised above his head, ready to sever Nagato's connection to the chakra. Nagato willed the black chakra orbs around him to intercept the swordsman, but found them gone, absorbed into the chakra being stolen. Saimata cut through the chakra cord near Nagato's hands, severing 2 of them, and Naruto pulled the chakra away with one last great heave. The chakra split into 8 globules that landed heavily on the ground, and Naruto's 9 tails chakra reacted to grab a hold of one of the bigger chunks of chakra, which it absorbed fervently. Nagato pulled the remaining bit of chakra he had managed to keep a hold of back into his body, and a single red tail formed from the base of his back as black circles formed around his eyes. Nagato's vibrant red hair faded a bit to a duller, dead-looking color. Akatsuki's former leader sagged a bit as the energy of the 10 tails faded from him. His Rinnegan looked at Naruto, now without the tomoe around the rings. The golden Jinchuriki stood resolute, unharmed by his proximity to the blast that had nearly killed Nagato even with the 10 tails chakra. The whisker marks on Naruto's cheeks had become large bars, and the golden energy spiked his hair almost straight up, creating 2 horn-like protrusions. His high-collared sage's cloak had become enveloped in the golden aura as well, with 9 tomoe and a spiral added to the back. Black markings ran across his gold skin, completing the image. Nagato gasped at the sight. How? I have the Rinnegan. I was supposed to be the reincarnation of the Sage of 6 Paths. How are you closer to him than I am? I'm not closer to the Sage of 6 Paths, said Naruto, shaking his head. I'm me. And you're you. And your misguided attempts at peace have killed hundreds, including my comrades. And for that, I won't forgive you. A tailed beast ball swirled to life in Naruto's palm. Nagato closed his eyes as the attack neared him. His plan for peace had failed, been foiled by the last hurdle in his path. He had built a bridge to peace, and then sought to destroy it to prevent a return to the world that had been. And the supports of that bridge had fallen out from under him. As his body exploded in a sphere of black chakra, Nagato wondered what he could have done differently to secure the future he, Konan, and Yahiko had dreamed about as children. Once the blast subsided, Naruto's golden aura began to slowly fade, before leaving him entirely in a quick burst. Gasping at the sudden loss of power, Naruto fell to his knees and closed his eyes. Opening them in his mind, Naruto came face to face with the grinning fox, who was now over twice as large as before. What did you just do? The fox smiled at Naruto sadistically. I merely took back what was mine, and it feels so good to be complete again. I'd use my full might to escape and eat you whole, but you kept your end of the bargain, so I guess I owe you that. Now get out of my sight." With that, the Nine Tails roared menacingly, and the force propelled Naruto out of his own mindscape. Naruto opened his eyes to see Deidara looking at him worriedly, with an arm slung over his shoulder. He grinned sheepishly and struggled to stand, succeeding with a bit of help from his partner. "Sorry to worry you," he said. "No problem, yeah. And good job. You just saved, probably the entire world," said Deidara, looking around at the destruction caused by the massive battle. What had once been 3 mountains shaped like howling wolves that towered above the land of iron was now a ruined crater that was actually lower than the surrounding land. "Wish there were more rewards to saving the world than death and destruction," said Naruto glumly as he looked around at the chaos and devastation caused by the man he had followed towards peace for years. "Who says that there isn't, yeah?" asked Deidara, before grabbing Naruto's shoulders and kissing him. It was a strange experience, and Naruto didn't respond for a moment from the sheer shock of what was happening. Before he had time to respond though, Deidara pulled away and coughed awkwardly. "Good job there, but what's with the leftover chakra?" asked Kisame as he strode up, Saimata strapped across his back. He gestured over his shoulder to the blob of chakra that was slowly taking form. It was unclear what it was going to be at the moment, but they indicated that it would be massive. "That's a tailed beast," explained Naruto, half pissed at Kisame for interrupting and half glad for the excuse to focus on something else for a short time. "They'll reform quickly, so it might be best if we weren't here when they do." "Very well then," said Sasori as he walked up, supporting a tired Kakuzu that was looking older by the second. "Though I should probably give Kakuzu a new heart soon. I think I have a spare." "Yes, it was a pretty bad heart near the end," lamented Orochimaru. "Though this body was preferable to it. But this body might as well be weaker than the old one without any of the augmentations. Oh well, Kabuto and I will whip this body into shape soon enough." "So, what do we do now?" asked Naruto. None of them had any clue, but they imagined they would think of something. "So are you awake yet? I know you're not dead," said Kisame, Saimata slung over his back, more tired than he had ever been. The young Uchiha leaning up against a tree opened his black eyes sluggishly. "I'm not entirely sure why I'm not. Didn't you say you wanted to avenge your partner? I was the one who killed Itachi." Kisame's shoulders shook as he chuckled. "Itachi was a man of secrets, but I was around him often enough to learn a few. Let me share 2 of them with you. 1, Itachi was dying. Not many could notice it, but I saw the blood and heard the coughs when he thought no one was around." The information shocked Sasuke, but the lack of chakra beyond maintaining life prevented him from moving. "There's no way Itachi was," began Sasuke, but then he thought back to the final moments of his fight with Itachi. He had been a little too distracted to notice properly at the time, but the Susanoo had been having some adverse effect on Itachi. Sasuke had written it off as some kind of side effect of the Sharingan's ultimate technique, but now that he thought about it, he had never coughed up blood due to using the Susanoo. Seeing the look of understanding dawn on Sasuke's face, Kisame continued. "The second thing I knew about Itachi is that there was no way he could lose against you then if it came down to raw skill and power. Itachi let you win that fight, God knows why. And I'll pay you back blow for blow, but Itachi's blood isn't on your hands. It's on his own. So I'll let you live this time, don't waste it. We'll meet again." With that, Kisame walked away, leaving Sasuke to struggle to his feet. The last Uchiha managed to stand upright, and headed towards the site where the 3 Wolves Mountains had been. As he staggered towards the site, it became apparent that that land had gone from high mountains to a large crater in the ground. Sasuke's half-closed eyes fought off exhaustion to widen at the sight of 8 massive clumps of chakra slowly taking shape into various beasts. Akatsuki was long gone, and Sasuke began to limp over to the wreckage to look for any survivors of whatever had happened here. "Ha! Found it!" Sasuke whirled around at the shout, wincing at the pain and realizing that he was incapable of producing enough fire to light a candle in his current state. The Uchiha grimaced as he pulled a kunai out of his leg pouch, hoping surprise would be enough to give him an easy victory. Unfortunately, Suigetsu wasn't a complete idiot, and reacted to the familiar sound of a drawn kunai as any half-decent academy student would, with violence. "Let's test this baby out," shouted Suigetsu as his new sword was wreathed in a blue aura. The blade was encased in a massive blade of pure chakra that swung horizontally at Sasuke, who barely managed to duck under the swing, though it was more like a controlled collapse. The legendary sword sliced through the rocks behind Sasuke with worrying ease, and the Uchiha was scared for a moment that he had survived Kisame only to be killed by some random swordsman. Note to self, that uses a lot of chakra, mumbled Suigetsu as he staggered around like the town drunk before collapsing across from Sasuke. Who are you anyway? Someone who's lucky to have survived this. Who are you, and what are you doing here? Countered Sasuke, hoping that his chakra would recover faster than his opponents. Suigetsu Hozuki, future leader of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the Hidden Mist. I came back to get this sword, though. I don't exactly know how to use it all that well. The white-haired teen admitted sheepishly. Whatever, I don't have time to waste here, there are tailed beasts. Hold on a second, do you know what happened here? Asked Sasuke as Suigetsu got up to his feet unsteadily and started to walk away. From what Master Oro I mean Mistress Orochimaru. Corrected Suigetsu, giggling to himself at some joke Sasuke didn't get. Anyway, Orochimaru just said Akatsuki had a falling out with their leader. This is what's left when 10s rankers go at full force. And it won't be getting any prettier once those beasts come to their senses. Almost as if Suigetsu's words were the cue it had been waiting for, the nearest lump of malevolent chakra swung out an elongated chunk of what Sasuke imagined would become a tail eventually. The 2 ninja easily dodged the haphazard swipe even in their depleted state. Alright, this is getting dangerous, said a pale Suigetsu. I don't know who you are, I don't care who you are. I'm getting out while the getting's good. Wait a second, shouted Sasuke. Suigetsu turned around, obviously annoyed at being held up again. You said you work for Orochimaru. What is Akatsuki doing now? I'd imagine they're eating dinner. Replies Suigetsu sarcastically before dropping his sharpened smile. Seriously though, you're thinking too highly of me. All I've heard is we're going somewhere wet, whatever that means. Personally, I look forward to a little moisture, and not getting killed by a half-formed slug. See ya. With that Suigetsu placed the large sword on his back and took off. Sasuke grimaced as he began the long limp back to the Hidden Leaf village. The ninja world had been shaken to its very core by the death of the 5 Kage and the desolation of the Land of Iron. The place had become synonymous with suicide, as venturing there risked angering the 8 demons that had taken up residence in the land. Thanks to the tailed beasts, climates ranged from active volcanoes to deep forests to vast deserts where once there had only been harsh snow and fierce winds. The remaining villages were dealt another blow when only months later, the village hidden in the rain fell, not to any of the other villages seeking to fill the power vacuum as was expected, but a group of 6 powerful S-ranked ninjas in black and red cloaks. Oddly enough though, Akatsuki didn't stop there. The former terrorist group continued to push their own agenda by sweeping across the land and decimating the armies of the other villages that were preparing for war. Leaderless, there was little resistance from the major villages, who were glad that a long and painful war had been averted, even if half the world was under the control of Akatsuki. But Akatsuki did not stop there. Sir. You'll never guess who it is, said the ninja as he burst into Ao's office. The man left to guard the Hidden Mist village was serving as interim Mizukage, a post he wished every day he didn't have. Though he was grateful to Akatsuki on some level for either destroying the armies of the more minor villages or scaring them back into the woodworks, it was nothing compared to his rage over the death of the former Mizukage. Mei Terumi had led the rebellion for years against the oppression of Yagura, and by the end of those hard years she had been like a mother to most of the ninja that followed her. Not being able to protect her and Chojiro would haunt him to the grave. This had better not be some kind of game, shouted Ao, looking up from the mountain of paperwork with barely contained anger over his subordinate's casual tone. The ninja backpedaled both mentally and physically at his leader's tone. It's Lord Kisame. He's requested an audience and is outside now. Ao was even more frustrated at Kisame's title being used when he was a member of Akatsuki. Then again, the Hidden Mist had few allies in the world, and losing their Jinchuriki, a tyrant and a traitor, hadn't hit them nearly as hard as the other villages. Kisame was the leader of one of the first and most successful attempts on the Mizukage's life, making him some kind of celebrity among the former rebellion. Ao had been one of the many admirers that the monster of the Hidden Mist had, but that admiration had forever been destroyed by his part in the Mizukage's death. Ao looked out his office's windows to see that the blue-skinned swordsman was indeed standing outside the building, clad in the black and red cloak of Akatsuki and smiling with the sharpened teeth of a member of the 7 ninja swordsmen. By the time Ao had stormed down to the entrance of the building, a small crowd had gathered around Kisame, full of excitable young people who had heard of his exploits and respectful elderly who remembered watching him grow up. Ao shocked them all out of the past with his harsh tone. What are you doing here, Akatsuki? Business, I'm afraid, though I may treat myself to some crabs later. Local delicacy, you know, said Kisame as his grin grew a bit more before fading as he grew serious. Really though, I just need a little promise from the hidden mist. You guys don't go to war. Ever, and Akatsuki doesn't end any attempts to go to war. Simple, huh? Just think of Akatsuki as the army that stops armies. The deal seemed good to the older folks in the crowd. Akatsuki had demonstrated what they could do, and those who had lived through wars had no wish to repeat it. The younger members of the crowd were too caught up in actually seeing a living legend right in front of them to grasp the changing of the world order. Ao's skepticism and hate made him the only one to object. A hidden village's strength is based off of its performance in war. You wish to take that away and expect us to give all our power to the Akatsuki? Kisame chuckled. Not at all. Every other village is being offered the same thing. You should feel lucky I volunteered to come. We could have sent Kakuzu. This was followed by another laugh, which drew in the crowd, despite them not really knowing what they were laughing at. This will bring peace. My job is to get you to agree to that. Or make sure nobody is left to disagree. This is still my home though, so I'm trying to be lenient here, but there is a line. Don't cross it for your own pride. Ao's scowl deepened. We will never bow down to traitors like you, who lies himself with those who killed the Mizukage. Kisame had the gall to throw back his head in laughter. I thought the whole goal of your movement for years was to kill the Mizukage. Don't hate me just because I did what you couldn't. Yagura was a tyrant, but Maid Terumi was a fantastic leader, killed before her time by Akatsuki. Ao pulled out a scroll with 7 seals, though all but 2 were empty. I'll die before I surrender the future to scum like you. Kisame's laughter stopped abruptly. Does anyone else agree with him? Any supporters were silenced by Seimata breaking the ground as Kisame hefted it off his back. Noticing the lack of supporters, Kisame grunted in satisfaction. But you'd all be fine if things stayed the same, wouldn't you? How about this then? If you can beat me, Ao, Akatsuki will back off for good. The hidden mist will be beyond our influence. If I win, the village falls into line peacefully and embraces the way the world will be. Deal? There was a puff of smoke, and Ao was wielding a long needle with a length of wire thread at the base. Kisame smirked at the sight. To beat a legendary blade you need to use a legendary blade, eh? Sorry, but Kushimaru was never able to beat me. Ao silently made a hand seal, and a deep mist began to settle over the area. And now you want to beat me at silent killing? I'm no Zabuza, but you just keep digging your grave deeper. Kisame trailed off slowly as he faded into silence and began to reach out with his other senses to find Ao and kill him, knowing that Ao would be doing the same. Unfortunately, their chosen field of battle was right next to the village proper, and the ambient noise was distracting. Still, Kisame was alert enough to lean his head to the side as the Nuabari whisked by. A slight gash appeared on his arm as the sword shot right back almost immediately from behind. Kisame listened even more, and began to dodge an alarming number of strikes, considering that Ao was only one person throwing the sword. Ao meanwhile, was patting himself on the back for creating so many water clones to pass the sword between. He knew he had no hope against Kisame in a fair fight, which was why he hadn't used the blast sword Shibuki. A sword that used chakra was useless against Seimata. Kisame's attempts at hiding in the mist were commendable, but ultimately useless to the stolen Byakugan that resided under his eye patch. Kisame growled to himself at how rusty he had become with the signature technique of the 7 ninja swordsmen, and his home village even. He hadn't used it against a serious opponent since he had gotten Seimata. Looking down at his sword with a brilliant idea, Kisame grinned and rose his sword into the air. Ao almost gasped and gave away his position as the hidden mist technique began to drain his chakra incredibly quickly compared to usual as the mist began to swirl. His Byakugan saw the chakra flow out of the mist into Seimata, and he grunted in frustration as he ended the technique. Kisame grinned as Ao came into view. Now I remember why I never got as good as Zabuza at silent killing. I never needed to. Clever use of the clones by the way. Longsword ninja art, razor ensnarement, shouted Ao as he pulled suddenly on the wire attached to his sword. Kisame became aware of the razor-sharp, almost invisible wire that had been trailing the sword all this time and was now all around him. A sharper sword like the Thundersword's Kibo or the Sever Sword Kubakirbocho would have been able to cut through the thread of the Nuabari, but Seimata was probably the sword least aimed at actually cutting through things. Kisame knew that the razor wire would slice through him easily. He had seen Kushimaru stitch together enough necklaces as he had called them to know that Nuabari treated the human body like an arts and crafts project. Thinking quickly, Kisame jammed Saimata point first into the ground and holding himself up with a one-handed handstand that kept him above the threads as they dug into Saimata. The shark sword held up admirably, but it was now completely trapped. Kisame lowered himself on the other side of the threads and sprinted towards one of Ao's water clones. He grabbed the one-eyed clone before it could react. 1/10 of Ao's speed wasn't nearly enough to keep up with Kisame. The Akatsuki member slammed the clone into the ground where he exploded in a burst of water, which Kisame reformed into his own water clone with a simple seal. Kisame could have ended the fight even without Saimata in a heartbeat, but his pride as a swordsman was on the line, something Ao had likely been counting on when he brought out Nuwabari. The clone raced back to try and free Saimata as Kisame covered it. His unarmed combat wasn't fantastic, and using a water technique was a bad idea when he was trying to keep collateral damage to a minimum, but his taijutsu was enough to fend off the water clones until the clone managed to weasel Saimata free. Aided by the sword itself. Grabbing his sword, Kisame sliced the remaining clones in half with one fell swing. He then turned his attention to the real Ao, who had been the only one able to dodge his attack. Ao then took advantage of Kisame's follow-through to dash forward and strike out. Gentle blade. Chakra raced down the needle and Kisame just smirked as he spun his hungry blade around to intercept. Instead of eating the chakra right up like it usually did, Saimata began to writhe in pain when the smaller blade stabbed it. Kisame jumped back, suddenly wary of the needle. The blade was sharp, but it shouldn't have been able to pierce Saimata's scales. "What the hell did you do?" asked Kisame. Ao couldn't hold back a smirk. "I may not be a Hyuga, but the concept of the gentle fist is simple enough. Use the Byakugan to target the chakra system. And every living thing has a chakra system, even living swords." Kisame began to laugh maniacally at that, using Saimata as a crutch to keep himself upright. "What's so funny?" demanded Ao. "You've been waiting for me to eat your chakra or turn the battlefield into an ocean, and you've prepared all these countermeasures. But you forgot the basics. Water prison." Ao's eye widened at the technique's name, since it required the user to be right next to the target. Then he felt the water flowing over him, trapping him in an orb. Turning around, Ao saw what Kisame had meant. Smiling back at him, hands converted to the water for the technique, was Kisame's water clone. Kisame walked up to his captive and raised Saimata aloft. "Game, set, match. This is Akatsuki territory now." Saimata came down, and the water prison was dyed red by the time it hit the ground. "I must say, your security is shockingly lacking. Not nearly as tight as when I killed the 8-Tails Jinchuriki," said Orochimaru as he rose up out of the floor. "Ah, but where are my manners? I'm Orochimaru of the legendary Sannin, here to secure your village's future as a core member of Akatsuki." She whirled around at the sound, turning away from the paperwork that he had to deal with as the new Raikage after the deaths of both A and B. "And how would Akatsuki secure our villages?" "Future?" he asked, voice laced with sarcasm and loathing. "By not finishing the job you started? You've already doomed our village." Harsh words. Chastised Orochimaru. "But true. We did kill the Raikage, though that was under our old leader. Akatsuki has new management. All we'll do now is destroy any armies that are mobilized. You won't even have to stop taking missions. Protection from every other army as long as you don't raise your own. Akatsuki will enforce peace. I'm interested to see where this goes, aren't you?" She responded with a flurry of hand seals. Lightning illusion, flash of lightning pillar. A bright light emanated from his body, blinding Orochimaru. She acted quickly, drawing a kunai and extending its reach with lightning chakra and chopping off Orochimaru's head. She held his breath for a brief moment until the body didn't turn into a log or collapse into mud before smiling at the success of the element of surprise. "Or not. Perhaps your successor will be more understanding." She whirled around to see the body of the Sannin jerkily getting up, a long snake extended out of its neck. Following the serpent along, she saw it attached to Orochimaru's head, which was wearing a victorious smirk and joining the body once more. "Really now, don't look so surprised. Did you think I could be on the same team as the best medic in the world, strive for immortality, create hundreds of forbidden techniques, and be done in by a kunai and the element of surprise?" She brought his hands together in another seal, but Orochimaru's hand shot out like a snake and grabbed him by the fingers, holding him in the seal. "That's the other thing. We'll be around for about forever," said Orochimaru after faking a moment to think about it. "One last chance to agree before this office explodes." She grimaced once before spitting in Orochimaru's face. "The hidden cloud will never follow Akatsuki." Shame you won't live to see how wrong you are. Lava style, volcanic creation. Forming one-handed seals and slamming his palm on the ground, Orochimaru quickly ejected another body from his mouth out of the window as the ground beneath the office fractured, letting in a red light from below. Before she could even move, the lava burst upwards, immolating everything inside the mountain. It would have likely continued upwards, but the weaker glass structure of the Hokage's office let the lava pour out down the side of the mountain. Orochimaru looked onward at his handiwork, interested to see whether the artificial volcano would last long and see whether the next Hokage would be more accepting of Akatsuki's terms. Kakuzu had once been a man of subtlety. After all, flat-out overpowering the first Hokage would have been impossible, but Kakuzu's wit and planning had impressed the man enough to get his village a tailed beast. After that fight though, things had changed. Leaving the village by blowing up the jail cell and ripping out the hearts of the village leaders could hardly be called finesse. But this new method suited Kakuzu just fine, and he wasn't about to change now. Restocked on hearts from Sasori's army that allowed him to fight, unlike Orochimaru's old heart that was barely enough to keep him alive, Kakuzu once more used his favorite earth-style technique. The earth spear made his hand so hard that he hardly felt the gates of the village hidden in the rocks as he punched them down with nothing but his fist. Walking directly towards the Tsuchikage's office in the middle of the day in full Akatsuki regalia after literally punching down their door was about as far from subtle as you could get. He attracted a lot of attention from the ninja that the hidden rock had been preparing for war. The boulders came down on him like rain, but they did little to slow him down as they broke against his skin. The dominant chakra nature was earth, but several fire and even a not water technique were thrown at him. By the time he reached the office of the Tsuchikage, his mask and cloak were in tatters, but the attacks had mostly stopped as the ninja had slowly realized they were just wasting chakra. Kakuzu was greeted by the Tsuchikage's son, Kichi. A jonin worth over 50 million on the black market, dead or alive, and proficient in large-scale earth-style techniques. The information jumped to Kakuzu through force of habit as Kichi approached him. "Give me one good reason not to leave you 6 feet under," threatened Kichi. "You can disband your army, or I can disband it for you. Akatsuki will be the only peacekeepers in the world now," said Kakuzu simply, ignoring the threat. Seeing Kichi begin the seals for a technique, he continued. "I wouldn't if I were you." Earth style, sandwich. The rock ninja scurried to get out of the way as 2 massive hemispheres rose out of the ground and flew towards Kakuzu. 2 masks rose out of his back, one firing off a concentrated bolt of lightning while the other shot razor blades of wind to slice and dice the incoming walls of rock before they could reach him. Kichi seemed undeterred though. The proud ninja of the Hidden Rock Village will never kneel to Akatsuki. "I'm not sure you have a choice," said Kakuzu menacingly from behind his mask. His right hand turned a darker shade as it became as hard as diamond and segmented from his body halfway up his forearm. As the open hand flew through the air, Kichi flew through hand seals. Earth style, rock shelter. The reason water-style techniques were usually weak to earth-style ones was their inability to pierce through the numerous defensive techniques the style was famed for. The rock shelter was one of the most basic, yet remained the most usable as the strength of the barrier increased with the skill of the user, making a rock shelter used by a master like Kichi almost impregnable. Kakuzu's earth spear was a step above that though. It was a high-level earth-style technique used by a heart with a strong earth affinity by a ninja with over 100 years of experience. Kakuzu's hardened fist punched through the wall Kichi raised with little effort, though the barrier did slow down the attack enough for Kichi to dodge it. Earth Dragon Bullet. An earthen dragon head rose out of the rocks in front of Kichi and fired off several boulders that broke upon impact with the Akatsuki member's rock-hard skin, though the force did make Kakuzu grunt in exertion. His hand shot back and stitched itself back to the rest of his body, and Kakuzu slammed his hands together in a single hand seal designed to focus chakra. Kichi wasn't waiting to see what technique was though, raising another rock shelter, this time leaving a slit to see Kakuzu through. Kichi was surprised however that Kakuzu was simply standing there, glaring at him. It didn't make sense until he felt the sharp pain in the back of his knee. Quickly looking over his shoulder to find the source, Kichi saw a creature made of black threads and a white mask close its mouth and soar over him. Looking back to Kakuzu, Kichi's eyes widened to see the ex-waterfall ninja not 2 feet in front of him. Kakuzu picked Kichi up by the throat before the rock ninja could react and raised his other hand menacingly as the thread creature re-entered his back. "I'd love to continue our fight, but I'm a bit pressed for time at the moment, so kneel already." Kakuzu delivered a powerful, rock-hard chop to Kichi's kneecap, eliciting a suppressed yell of pain as the bone shattered. Kakuzu dropped Kichi on the ground, where his broken legs refused to hold him up any longer, and he fell to his hands and knees, gasping in pain. Kakuzu disregarded him and turned to face the horrified ninja of the rock village. "You can kneel willingly, or I can break more of you. Which will it be?" There were a few more broken legs in the village by the time Kakuzu left, but the nation fell in line quickly. Sasori had not been to the village of his birth in years. Just because he had never been there though didn't mean he didn't have an expansive network running through the entire village. In fact, more attention had been focused on the hidden sand village at any given time than anywhere else. One simple seal, and half the sand's population would follow him unquestioningly. Which is why it came as little surprise that the gates were already open for him. The two guards turned on each other in a heartbeat. The remaining one stood ramrod straight, saluting Sasori and covered in the blood of his former friend. Sasori smirked within his Hiruko puppet at the success of his coup. The hunched-over armored puppet slowly made its way through the village towards the Kazekage's home. The Akatsuki member didn't go unnoticed by the sand ninja in the village though. Those who weren't secretly his subordinates paused in their fights with their former colleagues to try and strike him, who they could attack without hesitation, but most were stopped by his loyal spies. The few that got through every now and then were effortlessly slapped aside by the large metal tail that slid out from under his Akatsuki cloak, leaving them groaning on the ground as the deadly poison seeped through their veins. Sasori worked his way up the Kazekage mansion, breaking down the door to the roof. Before him were several bodies of his subordinates in pools of their own blood, with one lone man standing before in the middle, clearly exhausted. The eye knot covered up widened as Baki saw the signature red clouds of Akatsuki. "What is this, Akatsuki? What have you done?" Sasori chuckled, though it was closer to a giggle before Hiruko altered it. "This is the result of years of planning. Spies and undercover subordinates, mind seals and meticulous planning. I've been planning my revenge for a long time, but I never thought I would use it for others, let alone in the name of peace," said Sasori as two more of his sand ninja landed on the roof on either side of him. Wind flared around Baki's hands once more. "Who are you? Why would you want revenge on this village? And what's this talk of peace?" "Simple really. All nations united under Akatsuki. No more wars, since there will be only one side. It has the future taken into account too. Half of us are practically immortal. As for why I had all this planned out..." "Stand down," explained Sasori calmly, addressing his two subordinates with the last words. "Yes, Lord Sasori." The two responded in tandem as they took a knee. Baki gasped in shock at the name of the legendary puppeteer. Sasori ignored them and faced the man who had been leading his village since the disastrous summit of the 5-cage. "So I hope that explains why I've been planning this for years. Now on to my current proposition. Akatsuki simply wants to warn you that any attempts to raise an army will be met with a blow that makes this look like child's play," droned Sasori as he slowly approached a wary Baki. "Order your forces to stand down, and all of mine will do the same. Or I can kill you and give the order myself. Make your choice quickly. I hate to be kept waiting." Sasori emphasized his point by bringing up his poisoned tail, holding it next to his face, prepared to strike. Baki looked around at the village from the roof of the Kazekage's mansion, situated to have an unparalleled view of the village. He could hear the distant screams of ninja fighting to the death, see the smoke curling up into the sky from the beginnings of fires. Gritting his teeth, Baki turned back to Sasori. "Gods forgive me. Stand down," he shouted out, his voice piercing through the night sky. "Good choice," said Sasori as he turned around to leave. "We'll be in touch." Jiraiya walked up to the black-clad blonde, eyes narrowed. "What happened in the Land of Iron?" he asked, wasting no time. "We discovered why Akatsuki was capturing the tailed beasts. Nagato fused them into the 10 tails." Naruto heard Jiraiya's sharp intake of breath, and held up his hand to stem the flow of questions. Then he sealed the 10 tails into himself. His plan was to kill all the cage with Akatsuki, then kill Akatsuki and rule the world as some kind of god. Akatsuki fought him, and we won. Finished Naruto simply. "And now?" asked Jiraiya skeptically. "I hear word of Akatsuki taking over villages by force. As far as I can tell, our plan is the same as Nagato's." "For better or worse, I'm not a god," said Naruto simply with a shrug. "If you have a better plan, I'm all ears. The difference between us and Nagato is that we can be stopped by each other if need be. Other than that, I'm not even sure if there's a difference." An awkward silence fell over the two sages as Jiraiya struggled to come to terms with what had happened. "So, I suppose you expect the Hidden Leaf to do the same. I've heard what happened in the Hidden Sand. Can we expect the same?" Naruto shook his head solemnly. "I called you here to talk in hopes of avoiding that. Sasori was a little heavy-handed, but if people are going to respect Akatsuki's terms, they do need to be shown that we have the strength to back up our words. Now that Sasori has done that, we can reach a more peaceful accord. Jiraiya nodded sagely, also hoping to avoid having Akatsuki attack the Hidden Leaf. One member could be defeated, but the damage would be considerable. 2 members, and the Hidden Leaf would lose. They simply didn't have as many strong ninja as they did even a year ago, and Jiraiya could only do so much by himself. I've heard rumors, but what are your terms? I want to hear them from you. The hidden villages cease all military actions. If a village raises an army, Akatsuki deals with it. Regular missions can continue with no interference. Explained Naruto simply, before a sad grin spread across his face. We create 2 sides, and our side has no one else. As long as we win, the cycle of war and hate stops moving forward. If we lose, the cycle breaks apart. Jiraiya was shocked that Naruto was prepared to go that far for the goal of peace, but one thing still bothered him. And are the other members of Akatsuki aware of this plan? Naruto smirked knowingly. Do they need to be? Once this plan is in motion, those are the only 2 outcomes. Peace brought about by Akatsuki, or peace brought about by their downfall. So this is your plan? It's good, but I'm not sure if I'm willing to entrust the future to a group of murdering criminals, said Jiraiya as he began to absorb natural chakra. Naruto turned around slowly, eyes closed. Then feel free to test my resolve. Deidara knows the plan. I'm not needed. If my death will stop the cycle for the generation needed for Akatsuki to be the only enemy the world knows, then so be it. I might just take you up on that, said Jiraiya as blue chakra began to whirl into existence in his right hand. Forming an orb, the Rasengan then began to take a reddish tint and give off wisps of flames as it warped the air around it. Sage art, Hellfire Rasengan, Jiraiya shouted as he thrust the flaming ball of death towards Naruto's head. The Akatsuki member opened his blue eyes to look at Jiraiya as the Rasengan got ever closer, and time seemed to slow down for the older sage. The Hellfire Rasengan dispersed centimeters from Naruto's face, preventing the technique from incinerating his body and the surrounding 100 feet, though Jiraiya's momentum kept him moving forward to deliver a powerful and heated slap to the middle of Naruto's face. Being in sage mode as he was, Jiraiya's slap still sent Naruto flying and left a red palm print across his face that would have been comical in any other circumstance. If Naruto hadn't been using as much natural chakra as he could without showing signs of it, the slap would have broken his spine and crushed his skull. You weren't in sage mode, and you weren't going to dodge that, said Jiraiya. You were legitimately prepared to die there. Why? Naruto slowly got to his feet, staggering a bit before catching himself, subconsciously taking in some natural chakra to speed up the healing process. The plan is in motion already, and you're the only ninja still alive who could stop it before the cycle of Akatsuki's rule is established. If my death is what it takes to ensure that pain doesn't happen again, I'm more than willing to give my life. Jiraiya smiled sadly. So it seems this is what the old toad was talking about. I can see your logic, and I was never destined to come up with the answer myself. I'll trust the future to you. For now. That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.